Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to deploy a virtual network using YAML files and Azure DevOps Pipelines. This way we achieve continuous integration and continuous delivery. Usually what happens is we deploy resources or code in different environments like Dev, UAT and Prod using Azure DevOps Pipelines. In our case, we are going to deploy a VNet using an ARM template. I'm going to quote the documentation about ARM templates. To implement infrastructure as code for our Azure solutions, we use Azure Resource Manager templates, or in other words, ARM templates. The template is a JavaScript object notation, known as JSON file, that defines the infrastructure and configuration for your project. In the template, you specify the resources to deploy and the properties for those resources. You can find ARM templates for every resource on the internet. I took one for virtual network. Aside from the ARM templates, we need a YAML file in order to implement continuous integration and delivery. YAML is a human-readable data serialization language, and it helps to configure pipeline as a code. It is necessary to have if you want to create an Azure DevOps pipeline. Having said that, let's start. The first thing we need to do is to create a new project. If you click on Azure DevOps, you will see a screen like that. I have already created one, but what you have to do is click on the New Project button, define the project name, private, it doesn't allow public, and that's it. And you click Create. However, if this is your first project, when you will try to deploy a pipeline, you will get an error. And you have to copy that link the error provides, and it will redirect you to a web page and an Azure form, like a Microsoft, form that you have to fill in. And it will take a couple of days to, to be granted permissions. So just bear that in mind, right? Let's say you have created the project and you are good to go. Click on the project, then go under repos and files. And here we are going to create two directories, one for dev, one for UAT, let's say, and just create our YAML files and the ARM templates for the VNet. And we are going to deploy those VNets to their respective resource group. Usually what happens is that you need to have a subscription for each environment. So one subscription for dev, one for UAT, one for prod, and then you build pipelines that will deploy to those subscriptions. In my case, I have only one subscription, but I'm going to create a different two resource groups for the example and deploy the VNet in two separate resource groups. Let me create two directories. Here, one for dev, and the first, here you have to provide the file name, and let's call it Azure Pipelines, Azure Pipelines, Pipelines dev.yaml. And let me copy the code I have here, commit to the master branch. And also let me actually create a new file that would be the ARM template. Let's call it vnet.json. Remember, I got these templates from the internet. It's nothing new. Just Google it and you will find an ARM template for the resource you want to deploy. Let's commit that. And also we need one for the parameters. That would be vnet.parameters.json. Let me copy the code from here. And here we are. Now, as you can see here in the vnet.json, we define the parameters, the vnet name, type, string, metadata, description. And here you define the type and the metadata, right, in this JSON ARM template. But we also need the parameters file. Here in the parameters file, we provide the VNet name, the address prefix, the subnet prefix, subnet name, and the values. And we are getting those parameters inside this VNet JSON. So here, as you can see, it says parameters, the VNet name, which is coming from the parameters file, and it will get this one. So let's say this is for dev, right? And we commit the change, and it's going to get all the parameters from the parameters file and populate what we have here, the VNet name, the subset name, the location, etc., etc., right? Now, we need one directory for, let's say, UAT. Why not folder UAT Azure Pipelines UAT.yaml, and essentially we are going to copy the same thing, but we are going to change the variable group to UAT. I will show you in a bit. Second pipeline, just for the time being, we will change the name, and I will explain what the variable groups is. And here VNet, yeah, I have to change that to UAT. Now, what is going to happen? Let me commit. So here in the YAML file, which is the same as the, let's go into the devs YAML file. We have to define the variable group. Now, actually, we don't have to define, but I want to demonstrate how you can use the variable groups. Let's go under pipelines. You will see there is a library icon. Click on that library, and you will get this view. And you can create a variable group for each environment. Usually, this is what happens. So let's create one called dev, and we add variables here, pipeline name, and that would be dev pipeline, and we click save. So here in this variable group, we define variables, and we can pass these variables as parameters in our YAML file. So if we copy this, go back to repos, under dev, here you see I have defined the variable group, that's dev, and now we can actually use the variable that we defined. We can do that by using the $, open bracket, the variable name, and close bracket. You will see it here as well. Let me remove the trigger here and the PR for the pull request that we don't need right now. There are plenty of things you can do in a YAML file. Here we're just explaining the just very basic. Here you have on Azure, on task, you have to use Azure Resource Manager template deployment version 3, which is the latest version. You can have multiple stages as well and multiple jobs. Here we have one stage called template deploy, and jobs, we have one job, and for each job you can define several steps. And here we define a task. The inputs would be the deployment scope, resource group, Azure Resource Manager connection. This is what we have to do now to create a service connection. I will show you how you can do that. Subscription ID is what you will find on your Azure portal, when you go into Azure subscription, you will find the subscription ID from here. Copy that and paste it here. And then we have action, create or update resource group. Resource group name, let's create a new one that goes from my previous one. We go into resource group, create, let's call it test dev west Europe. That's fine, we don't need that tags, and create, and we are going to paste that here, West Europe, and CSM file. Here is the system default working directory, which is this one here on this level. Then /dev, that's the directory here, /vnet.json, which is the ARM template and the parameters that we pass in our ARM template. Then we click commit, and here under name also you see this is the name that we defined in the variable group. This is how we can pass from the library. We can define variables that for each environment, for the dev environment, and pass them into our Azure pipelines. Back to repos, and we have to do the same for UAT, right? Let's create a new file in a JSON, not, and copy the code, and we need one more file, vnet parameters.json. Let me copy that as well. Here we can change the name to UAT, same vnet address prefix, etc, etc. We don't change here anything. We don't need to do that. Of course, in a real life scenario, you have to configure those parameters file and all the stuff here with real values that make sense. Here under name, let's remove that. Not second pipeline, we need this one. Let's call it pipeline name, like in the other one. Resource group, the same thing, but let's create another resource group called test UAT. Usually you do, instead of resource groups, you use subscription, but for now it's the same concept. I don't want to create a new subscription. Create, and then we paste that here. Okay, UAT vnet JSON, vnet parameters under the UAT working directory. That's fine. And there is one last thing we need to do, is to, actually there are two things we need to do to create a variable group for UAT and create a variable called pipeline name. And the second one is to create an Azure Resource Manager connection, a service connection. Let's create the variable group first. Let's go under library. We can clone this, which is perfect. UAT pipeline name, UAT pipeline, save. And you also can play with the security and the pipeline permissions. You will see. Let's go back to repos, and we have to define the service connection. You have to click on project settings here, then scroll down, service connections, create a service connection, Azure Resource Management, Next, service principal manual. Next, I have already created a service principal subscription ID. Let me get the subscription ID, copy that, paste it here, subscription name, Azure subscription, service principal ID. Let's go back to Azure Active Directory. I have already created a service principal under app registrations. We need to get the ID of the service principal key. I have it stored on the key vault under secrets. I have it here. Let's display the value. So the secret value, copy. Yeah, tenant ID. Back to Azure Active Directory. And tenant ID. This is the tenant ID. Verify that. Okay, verification succeeded. Perfect. Service con dev. Grant permission, access permission to all pipelines. Verify and save. Perfect. Let's go back into repos. Under dev, we have, let's change here the service manager connection names, service con dev. Let's create one for a service connection for UAT as well. Service connection, same process, manual, next, subscription. I'm going to do it a little bit faster this time. So tenant ID, subscription ID here, subscription name, we paste, copy that, paste that, service principal ID, back to, to Azure Active Directory, app registration, service principal, client, okay, perfect. And the last one is under Key Vault, we have the secrets. Let's get the value, copy that, verify and call it service con UAT, grant access permission to all pipelines, save that, go back to repos under UAT, we change the service connection name, and now it's time to create our pipelines. Under pipelines, you click here, click on pipelines. I have already created one. Let's delete those. Delete. They are not necessary. They are irrelevant to what we are doing now. And click New Pipelines. Azure repos Git. You select the project. You can use starter pipeline and you can paste your YAML code here, or select an existing YAML file. We have already created a YAML file, so we go here, we select the YAML file, the dev one, because we need one for dev and one for UAT. Click continue. You will get the YAML here. You can make changes if you want, change the name, whatever, and click run. And that is going here, because remember we used the variable groups in the library. You need to view here and grant permissions for the pipeline to use this variable group. You click permit, that's fine. and this is going to deploy a VNet under the resource group for dev, right? Here you can see all this command it is running, and here it's running our YAML file and our templates, and here you can see the deployment name is VNet, etc., etc. Template validation, starting deployment, and perfect, it finished. So you go back here, you are waiting for it to finish. It will give you, the green light here at the end. If you go into Azure portal under resource groups and open the test dev resource group, you will see a VNet, right? And you click on the VNet, and this is the VNet we have parameterized in our JSON file, and it has all these configurations. You can create address spaces and all this kind of stuff, which is pretty cool if you think, because you don't need to manually deploy any resource. You define and configure your resource in this JSON file, in this ARM template. You deploy the ARM template and you create a resource in different subscriptions, so different resource groups, etc., etc. So everything is, you automatically do deploy resources without a lot of effort. However, when you configure the ARM template and the YAML file, of course, this is a very simple example. In reality, it's much more complicated, and you have to have a lot of patience actually and play around with the ARM template. It's a bit frustrating, in my opinion, although I think they have this bicep format now, and you can, instead of using ARM templates, it's easier to actually configure stuff. But using an ARM template, this is how you deploy a resource. You create a pipeline. Let's create one pipeline for dev, a new pipeline, Azure repos git. You select the project, the existing YAML file, one pipeline for UAT, the same, we click run, and that could trigger our pipeline. View again, grant permission to use the variable group UAT, and this is going to run the our second pipeline for UAT, right? Now let's go back to here under pipelines. You will see here the name of the pipeline. It's what we have defined in our variable groups, in our parameters for the pipeline name. Remember, UAT pipeline, dev pipeline. And here is just an example of how to pass variables from the variable group and configure your YAML file. And if we go into resource groups under test UAT, you will see our VNet here. Usually what we do is to trigger the UAT pipeline automatically once the dev pipeline completes successfully. Conversely, when the UAT pipeline finishes successfully, we trigger the prod pipeline. And this is how you achieve continuous integration and delivery. There are many things you can do using YAML files. You can define jobs and tasks, and you can even write Python code straight inside the YAML file. I don't have advanced knowledge of YAML pipelines, YAML files myself, as I didn't have time to work on them in our project, and to be honest, configuring things is not my favorite part of the day. However, there is a lot of potential using YAML files, and you can achieve a lot of things, and you can automate a lot of things. And Azure DevOps pipelines can become very useful. so I encourage you to play around. I will upload the YAML files and the VNet ARM templates, although you can find even better examples on the internet to play around. Thank you for watching. Please click the like button and subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will see you in the next one.